very similar to what happened and what caused the plane crash of 1977 on Tenerife Island in the Canary Islands in the Atlantic Ocean. And what happened? There was a huge fog that settled on Tenerife Island, and all these planes were directed to land there because the main airport in Spain had a bomb scare. And because of this bomb scare, all the planes were directed to this little island of Tenerife. So it was quite crowded with all kinds of airplanes landing, and there was 747s landing and 747s being parked, and the air traffic controllers had to direct all this traffic jam of airplanes. And for 5 hours, the KLM, that's the Royal Dutch Airlines, that was a Boeing 747. The captain of that flight was Jacob Van Zanten. Jacob Van Zanten, who was 30 years an airplane pilot. He was experienced. He had the full grace of state, and he was the poster boy for KLM flights. He was on all the advertisements, and he was just the hero of captains of airplanes. So there he was waiting 5 hours, and the thick fog on Tenerife Island didn't lift. And in those days, this is 77, they could only communicate by voice. And even that, there was, when one was talking, there was no double communication on those CBs. So that might have been a hindrance and a little factor in the accident as well. But what happened was the Pan Am flight 747 landed. And waiting, the KLM Boeing 747, he was waiting and waiting and waiting. 5 hours, getting impatient. This is about the time of Easter time. At that time, there was 53 children on board. 53 children on board, you know, families traveling. The Pan Am flight landed, and they landed in this pool of fog. And so they were being directed by the air traffic controllers to come off of exit 3 to the left. But the captain couldn't see. The thick fog blinded his view. And he passed exit 3, and he was moving on to exit 4. And it's during that time, the captain, Van Zanten, becoming very impatient, he was communicating with the air traffic controllers, and he basically said, "I'm going. I've waited long enough, I'm going." And one of his co-captains, there was like 3 or 4 co-captains in the cockpit with him, said, "But we don't have the clearing." And okay, so he relented. He waited a few minutes, and he could hear that the Pan Am flight had just landed, and he thought it was already off the runway. But the Pan Am flight, remember, missed exit 3, and they were going on to the exit 4. And it's at this moment that the air traffic controllers did not give the direct command, "You can go." That is a big principle for all airplane pilots. You do not take off without the clear instruction from the air traffic controllers. The coast is clear, you can go. He did not receive that. And he said to his co-captains, "We've waited long enough, we're getting out of here." The co-captain said, "Well, you know, he's 30 years experience. We got to trust him. He's the superior. He's the captain of captains. He's got the grace of state." And none of them spoke out. Not one of them spoke out and said, "This is madness. You don't have the clearing. You don't have the right to go." And what one of them could have done was pull the wheel and just stopped everything. But as happens, with a misunderstanding of authority that obedience is absolute. And sometimes you have to raise your voice and say, no, we're not going. They should have done that. But they stayed silent. They trusted the superior. And he gunned the Boeing 747. Now you're getting this huge beast rolling and rolling and rolling. And it's going and gaining speed. The fog is still thick and heavy. The Pan Am flight was, they heard on the communications that Captain Van Zanten was taken off. And they said, we're not off the runway. But it was too late. And they were trying to turn on the grass to get out of the way. And it's at that moment, the KLM flight coming full speed, the captain saw the Pan Am flight turned sideways in front of him. He panicked and pulled the steering wheel, whatever you call it, and to lunge the airplane sooner than what it would normally do. The tail of the airplane scraped the pavement, setting off immense sparks. And remember, the plane had just been loaded with fuel, completely filled. And he couldn't do it. And the wheels in the bottom of the plane hit the top of the Pan Am flight, tore the roof right off. But it didn't kill all the people on Pan Am. Most of them were killed. And then with the sparks and the collision and the fuel tank full, the whole KLM flight blew up. It was one of the worst disasters in airplane history. The final results, out of 396 people on the airplane of the Pan Am flight, 64 survived. There was 332 deaths on the Pan Am flight, and between both flights, 583 people died. 583 people died, 64 survivors, including the captain of the Pan Am flight. He survived, and he saw it happen. And they were able to jump out, and there's footage and pictures you can find that show the survivors getting out of there and seeking some refuge. And some of them are interviewed after. And it is true, after the court case over the whole deal, Captain Jacob Van Zanten was found guilty, and KLM flight was sued. And they had to pay for all the expenses that obviously you can't pay for such a mistake. It is true, I mean, we all make mistakes, but I want to compare this terrible accident to what's happening now in the society. Archbishop Lefebvre was the air traffic controller. He was the one foretold by the Virgin Mary of Quito. He's the one that had all the experience in Africa as a missionary, as a bishop, as an archbishop. He lived through the council. He saw the rats doing their dirty work. He saw the Catholic Church hijacked by these modernists. And he, seeking God's will, he had seminarians turn to him. He founded a seminary, a refuge, to continue the Mass in faith. Archbishop Lefebvre, before he died, before he did the consecrations, he wrote a letter to the 4 bishops. You can read the letter, it's quite public, in 1987, and he says to them, do not seek an agreement, do not make peace with modernist Rome, do not negotiate anything with modernist Rome until Rome comes back to the faith. He puts it even more clearly than that. He says, until we have a perfectly Catholic Pope, then you won't even need to have an agreement or be recognized, because the Pope will be Catholic, we're Catholic, no problem. We're back to what the Church is supposed to be, as it's supposed to be running. So those were the clear directions. No negotiation, no agreement, no phony recognition till we have a perfectly Catholic Pope. Is that hard for anybody to understand? The principles with the airplane pilots, you cannot break the principles or it's disaster. And the airplane pilots Today they go by instruments, totally by instruments, but in 77 it didn't. So they had to rely, and in this battle we have to rely on the voice of Catholic tradition, voice of Archbishop Lefebvre, the voice of the Virgin Mary, and the constant teaching of the Catholic Church. Those are our guides in this fog. But Bishop Follet, I cannot judge his heart, his intentions, and I hope they're at the best. I don't know, God knows. But he decided in 2012, and we discover now in hindsight, in 97 he was dealing with Grec, taking steps towards this false reconciliation. And so he did not listen. He broke the principles laid down by tradition, by God himself in Revelation, by the popes of tradition, and by his very own founder and superior. Archbishop Lefebvre made it very clear, don't take the flight off, don't make any agreement until Rome comes back to tradition. That's so clear. You can listen to his ordination, his sermon of the consecrations in 1988. He says it 3 times. Read it, reread it, have your children read it. It's so clear, it's not difficult. Bishop Follet did not listen. And he went ahead with binding the Society of St. Pius X by 6 conditions which are self-destructive. And it's binding. And then the doctrinal declaration, which is expression of a new faith. It's no longer expressing the Catholic faith, because the Catholic faith is not ambiguous and muddles with error and heresy, which the declaration does. So he gunned the SSPX little airplane, and where are we? Where would you guess we are right now in the stages of the accident? Anybody? Where would you guess we might be? Yes?
1 or 2 seconds before impact. Just before impact. So he can still say everything's fine. We haven't crashed yet. Nobody's died.
Yeah,
you know, we're still airborne, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're heading for a destination. Nope.
Anybody else? Anybody have another angle?
But I think the impact is already in a sense made because of all the teachings and all the people and everything. I mean, it's all changed. It's all changed. I think it's too late in a sense.
Yeah.
We have to just continue.
Yeah.
Despite
Well, yeah. Father Pfeiffer thinks that the hit has happened. The explosion has not yet hit, though. It's hit, but it's not yet. It's within seconds, obviously. But the disaster is not 583 people dead. The disaster is far worse. All these families, all the priests, all the brothers, all the nuns, all the family and tradition of monks.
And all the sacrifices to build up all these churches and,
yes.
and priories and schools.
Yes. And schools.
Material sacrifices,
yes.
and prayers, all that.
And the disaster is the loss of the faith, at least the waning of the faith. And this is happening everywhere. The girls are more and more running around in pants, and the priests are not, they're tolerating it. They're not saying, you know, dads, make your girls dress like girls. Always, but especially when they come to Mass. In some of the parishes, the girls right after Mass jump into a pair of pants and come to catechism in their pants. Granted, pants and dress is not the first commandment, we all know that, but we don't go along with the modern world in its pagan fashions. We have to resist that as well. And the music, the modern music and the rock and roll, hip-hop, whatever you want to call it, contemporary music. We have to be watchful of these things and keep them out of our homes and out of our hearts and teach the children to love virtue. But it's sliding. There was a priest that gave a sermon in St. Mary's, Kansas. 5 sermons on one Sunday where he basically says, if you cannot support a good education for your children, don't have the extra children. He has no right to say that. And that, of course, encourages indirectly NFP, which is to space children. And I have a confession myself to make. I used to say to married couples, This is kind of what we were taught, what I was taught by a priest of the society. You may space children, but you cannot limit them. Now, I only understood it from one way. I always understood it as the mother, obviously when she has children in a very difficult birth or a cesarean, she needs time to recover. That's obvious. So that's how I understood it. You may space the children, meaning give the mother time to get back to recovery and full recovery and health. But there's a danger to that, because spacing children, well, what does that mean? It could last a year, it could last 2 years. When is the woman going to be ready? And there's a little danger in that phrase. So I no longer use that phrase. And I just repeat the words of Genesis. The book of Genesis, which is true scripture inspired by God. It is inerrant, there's no error in scripture. And Moses wrote the 5 first books of the Bible. And in there, God commands, on the 4th day, he commands the birds, and when the animals are made, he tells them, increase, fill the earth. But when he creates man on the 6th day, he has 3 commands to have children. Crescite, increase. Implete, fill the earth. Multiplicamini, and multiply. 3 commands from Almighty God to have children. The animals only get 1 command. And this is the desire of God to fill the earth with children. So we have to teach the Catholic teaching, which is have the children God sends. Let God do the calculating and be open to all the children God sends. And by moral theology, it is many people don't know this, and married couples don't know this. And I know this is probably a matter that I wouldn't say in front of young children, obviously. But it's Catholic teaching, and you're old enough, and you should know. It is a mortal sin in marriage when one spouse asks for the marriage debt. If the other spouse refuses, it's a mortal sin. A lot of people don't know that, and in confession, you find as a priest sometimes this is the cause of the friction between the couple. And one of them, maybe they don't understand, they don't know that Catholic teaching. That's part of the vow. They owe each other the marriage debt. And why is it a mortal sin? Because it can lead the other spouse, one of them, to either a solitary sin or worse, adultery. So you see the wisdom of Mother Church in her teaching. And so that's what we have to say as priests. We must never encourage spacing children and use that dangerous word, NFP. It's not Catholic birth control. There's no such thing. And NFP is promoted. It was promoted in the 1940s and 50s by Catholic priests as Catholic birth control. And now it looks like, I understand, Father Chazelle says in France, it's quite often promoted by many priests of the society. And it's wrong. It's wrong. And we must take, if you're married, you take the children God sends. Because, do you think St. Bernadette's parents could afford a good education for all their children? They could hardly feed them. So based on that principle of equating procreation with the upbringing, procreation is first. And as an addendum comes, obviously, upbring them, educate them, raise them, and so forth. The first is procreation. And that's Catholic teaching. It's in canon law. It's always been the teaching of the Church and the natural law. So to put education so equal with it that if you can't educate, you can't procreate children, that's false teaching. And it must be exposed. Because St. Bernadette's parents, they couldn't afford the local academy and college. No way. But we would not have had St. Bernadette, nor we would have St. John Bosco, nor we would have had St. John Vianney, nor we would have Mother Mary Elias of the Blessed Sacrament. You'll see her story on the back of the Gladio. So, anyway, this spirit, this liberal spirit is crept in. But the liberalism is firstly on the compromise of doctrine. Once you compromise on doctrine, It's downhill from there. So the lesson from Tenerife, 1977, March 27th, is if you're an airplane pilot, don't take off until you get the clear commands. And Bishop Fillet broke, he didn't listen to the clear commands, and look at the disaster that's caused. And you know what? We can all forgive, we can all understand a man making mistakes, even a bishop, even a pope. He could turn this around tomorrow. He could turn it around today if he really wanted. If he really wanted. He sees the confusion. And there's a good gentleman in the Midwest who had a conversation with Bishop Fillet. He told me about this. I asked him if I could say that. I won't say his name. But he said in his interview with Bishop Fillet, he talked to him, he asked him, do you find anything doctrinally wrong in the doctrinal declaration? Bishop Fillet said no. Now this was just less than a month ago. This was February 3rd, I think, around that time. So he still doesn't find anything doctrinally wrong with that horrible doctrinal declaration. That shows you he's gone. And he should be removed. The society of priests should not tolerate this captain running the airplane right into a huge blazing accident. And he could turn it around today, but he doesn't want to. He really believes in this false agreement with modernist Rome. Let's just be recognized, nothing has changed in that whole story, but everything has changed. And like Archbishop Lefebvre said, little by little you will abandon the faith and the fight for the faith and accept the principles of Vatican II. It's already happening. It's already happened. That's why I think it is fair to say that right now the hit has happened. The collision is on. But people haven't seen yet the explosion. That is, the praise coming out one Sunday, the peace of the Lord be with you always, folks. That's down the road. It's happened in Campos. They already got the new Mass. And if they don't have the new Mass, okay, they're going to have some hybrid Novus blend with the Tridentine Mass, which is sacrilegious and blasphemous. You cannot do that. You can't do that. So, anyway, what a lesson to learn and pray. And what can we do but continue? Pray for Bishop Fillet, Bishop Galarreta. They have a lot to answer for. Pray for Bishop Tissier. As you know, Bishop Williamson released that letter quoting Bishop Tissier's sermon on January 1st. A great sermon, very powerful, like the old SSPX. Now just pray that for Bishop Tissier, it's not just words, but that he can back it up now with action. To start taking action. And he can be with the resistance. We have a place for him in Kentucky if he wants to come. There's Father Thomas Aquinas. He can go with Bishop Williamson in England. There's a home for him. There's no problem. But he has to not just talk. He has to act. And that's the hard part. So he needs prayers. And many society priests who see this, they don't like it. They need help of grace and prayer to act. You know, it's easy for us to say, you know, they should do something, but I know the pressure. I know the pressure, and they're threatened, and they're going to be transferred to, you know, Madagascar or somewhere, or the southern tip of the South Pole on some iceberg. And that's, but they shouldn't fear. They have to stand for the truth. So pray for them, and all the priests, and of course pray for Bishop Williamson. Good Bishop Williamson, you know, he has a lot of pressure on him. He's got, you know, all the Jews on him. He's got Pope Francis on him. He's got his own Bishop Fillet on him. He's got even this resistance priest saying, what are you going to do? So he is, you know, when you're up on the tall trees, it's windy up there, and it's hard to stay in one place. So he is being pulled, no doubt, by many devils attacking him. But pray for him, because it's in his hands to actually do something about it. And he can. And I think he will. I think he will. So anyway, that's enough of that. Persevere. I can take a question or two and then I gotta go home. Seminary life in Kentucky, they all did well in their midterm exams, and the seminary goes on peacefully. It's muddy because it's been raining and melting snow. It's anything but a Hilton hotel, I can tell you that, but that's good. Between us, that is good training for priests, because soft priests with luxurious settings and no dirt, and no mud, and no work, and no sweat, that's not good for priests to be trained. But Father Pfeiffer is often out there also shoveling dirt with them, laying down concrete, and so they're studying and doing some work. They do study a lot. It is demanding, and so pray for them. There's some good candidates there. God willing, they'll be good priests. And pray for them all. And thank you. And is this being filmed?
Yes.
Okay. All right. For whoever watches this on film, on behalf of the seminary, we want to extend our great gratitude for everybody who's supported us in any way, and sending clothes and socks and pants for the seminarians, and any support, above all your prayers and sacrifices. I never used to like having sermons filmed or recorded, but now I understand that the internet is actually an avenue that St. Paul would have used to reach many, many souls. I never thought of this before, but it is a new highway of apostolate. So you can get Bishop Williamson's sermons, Father Chazal's, Father Pfeiffer's, Dom Thomas Aquinas. So anyway, do pray for our seminarians, pray for the professors too, and pray for Bishop Williamson. All right, we'll say a little prayer and I'll let you go. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, amen. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
O Sacred Heart of Jesus,
Mercy on us.
Immaculate Heart of Mary,
Pray for us.
Saint Joseph,
Pray for us.
benedictio Dei, omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, et scenas in vos in mare semper. Amen.